I'm going to very briefly change the topic, and I'll just talk very briefly about Australian soldiers in Afghanistan. Now, whenever an Australian soldier is killed in Afghanistan, the body is brought back, and then we have the ceremony, a ritual, where the Governor-General will say what a wonderful Australian he was, dedicated, brave, honourable, and all the rest. And then the Prime Minister will say the same thing, then the Defence Force Minister will say the same thing, and the Defence Force Chief Angus Houston will say the same sort of thing. But what will happen if one of these Australian soldiers happen to get killed in action? For instance, a few Australian soldiers were videoing a bridge which they were blowing up. They were blowing up a bridge in Afghanistan. And one of the Australian soldiers, and they were laughing at the time, they said it scared the F out of that mufti. And look at that coon. I'm in Afghanistan now, running over coons. Yee-haw! This is our Australian soldiers, remember saying this. Sounds like fun. Damn sand coons. This is our Australian soldiers, our wonderful fighting force over in Afghanistan. Dune coons, sand niggers, F them all. And ragheads. Now, if those Australian soldiers that said all that get killed in action and their bodies brought back here, what's the Governor-General going to say about them? Wonderful, honourable, brave, dedicated Australian soldier who unfortunately got killed in action. Well, you know, I mean, let's face it, not all Australian soldiers are like that. It's only a small minority. But unfortunately, this small, well, perhaps it's more than just a small minority. Perhaps it's a cultural thing. It was very interesting to note that Angus Houston, the Defence Force Chief, was actually very embarrassed. And he said, oh, what a shocking thing for our soldiers to be saying, blah, blah, blah. I mean, there is a culture in the Australian Defence Force, a culture of covert racism, if you like, where there's a superiority sort of, what do you call it, a mentality.
Boy, the Australian, soldiers have already shot up several families in Afghanistan. I'm not saying they deliberately did it, but they did it anyway. And, after that event, I think in one family, 7 members were killed, 4 of them were kids.
If they were telecommunications engineers...
You're a government, you seem to be constantly, negating whatever it is I say. You're an ASIO representative.
Because you're always right.
Because it's constant. No. Well... That's all right, but when it's your turn...
No, but he makes a good point. Why are insults so... why are we so sensitive to words when people are actually getting killed on both sides, you know?
Well...
Why is it offending someone's feelings?
Words actually indicate potential deeds. That's the whole point. It's an attitude
That's
thing.
a left-wing attitude.
It's an attitude thing.
Right-winger.
It's an attitude thing. If you think that Afghanis are niggers and sand coons and ragheads, etc., that's what our Australian soldiers say and believe, and it seems to be the case, then you can imagine if they do shoot up some Afghanis, are they going to be really worried about it? I mean, their attitude...
Well, considering some of
their attitude is stated publicly.
These aren't telecommunications engineers out there to set up satellites. They've been sent there to kill people.
Who's been sent there to kill?
The soldiers.
What soldiers?
The Australian soldiers. They're
To kill
sent there
what people?
to kill the enemy.
They need to kill.
And who would that be? Well, there must be people over there that, earmarked.
No, but they're not, because they're not wearing uniforms.
We're not there to
No, but the enemy isn't wearing uniforms. It's not a traditional war, so that's why they can't know who is what. So obviously they're going to be frustrated and mentally sort of
During the
tested.
Vietnam War, the enemy...
That's right.
Didn't have uniform on.
And that's why you had Milo Massacre.
There are wars around the world where uniforms aren't an issue.
Yeah, and you're wondering why the people use names to define the enemy. Of course they're going to use negative terms for the enemy.
You don't want them to use names. Don't send them out there to shoot people.
I think you're all off the track. You missed the whole point.
No, but these people aren't diplomats. You're not quoting diplomats.
Culture. There's an ingrained culture in the Defence Forces, and it has been openly stated, openly exposed for what it is. It's a racist culture.
It's been that way for thousands of years.
We go over there, thinking we're highfalutin, you know, God, divine people, and we have a mission, almost a God-spelling mission to, you know, look after the underlings of the world. You know, we're the superior race. It's a bit like, Australia's a little bit like the Nazis during the last war, where we think we're above everyone else, including Afghanistan. I mean, that's the sort of thing.
No, it's just natural behaviour. Listen, if a family member of yours,
you're telling me you'd be out there to sent out there to kill people and think that they're equal and just as good as you? You're killing them for a reason.
I mean, you've got a warped idea of what military missions are. They're not sent out there to kill people.
Then why do they have guns?
To defend people, to defend the institutions.
Why do they have guns
to
if they're not going to
defend
kill
villages,
anyone?
to defend ordinary Afghanis.
Yes, by killing people and going to stop them.
Bring in law and order. That's the whole purpose of their mission over there. And to build the infrastructure. That's the main purpose, is building infrastructure.
you're getting the department.
No, you're the one buying the government rhetoric.
Yeah.
So we're not over there to kill people. I mean, you've got a warped idea about military missions.
No, you're mixing it up with international diplomacy. That's what you're mixing up military operations with.
People help their government to build their infrastructure, bridges, to develop schools.
You've forgotten why they're there in the first place.
There's a whole host of reasons why we're over there, and it's not we're not over there to kill people. And that sounds like a 2-year-old sort of.
Why are they armed?
Eh?
Why are they armed? Why are we sending in military there?
Why are the police armed? Why is anybody armed? To defend themselves, you know.
Against who?
What do you think? Just because you're armed?
Against who?
Because you're armed, you just go out and kill people. I mean.
No, not any people, but specific people.
I think you've got the right IQ and the right ideas to you make a perfect candidate. So you immediately go to the recruiting office and they'll sweep you off your feet, send you over to Afghanistan. I'll hear you saying, you'll probably post on Facebook, look at all these sand coons, all these niggers.
I wouldn't go.
That's what you'd be
See, that's the difference. I wouldn't go. I wouldn't go.
You go over there, you want to kill people. You just
there.
admit it. That's all you
I've got no business being there, and I wouldn't go.
You would. Put a rifle in your hand or a machine gun, you go berserk. You want to join up, mate.
Do you remember why they went originally?
You've got all the qualifications. You've got
Do you remember why they went
mentality,
originally?
You've got the right philosophy. You do well. I see in white Australia, I wouldn't touch it. It's okay for the Indians to do all that dirty work. You know, there's an awful lot of racism inbuilt into our society and the way we actually do treat other countries. And our Australian forces were exemplary in showing their racism when they referred to Afghanis. Our Australian soldiers referred to Afghanis as ragheads, as sand-coons, and all sorts of muftis, and all sorts of, you know, racial derogatory comments about the Afghanis. And our Australian soldiers are supposed to be in Afghanistan to help the Afghani people, and here we are having Australian troops mocking, ridiculing the ordinary Afghani individuals and Afghani people, making them look like they're a bunch of loonies. You know, that as though Australians are somehow so superior that, you know, we are the fault of civilisation in the world. We're not. We're a runt. We're nothing of the sort. But I thank those Australian soldiers for showing unequivocally how racist the Australian Defence Forces are at the core. And it was just lucky that those few soldiers had the common sense, if you like, to post their racist views on Facebook to show the world what Australian forces are really like at the core. There's a culture in Australian Defence Forces, a racist culture, and don't think there isn't, because there is, always has been. Only got to go back to Vietnam for that, and I won't bore you with the details there, but there's a whole lot of conflicts that Australian Defence Force has been involved in, where racism is an undercurrent in their modus operandi. A slight exception would be East Timor, where Australian soldiers seem to do a fairly decent act over there, trying to help the East Timorese helped kick out the Indonesians from East Timor. So that was a reasonably good result. But in Afghanistan, it's an absolute disaster, a public relations disaster. I mean, the Taliban would be jumping up and down with joy at the obvious racist elements that are in our defence forces and posting it on Facebook for the whole world to see. I mean, what a joke, what a mockery it is that our defence forces are in pretending to be looking after the Afghani people. That's got nothing to do with that whatsoever.